I paid my son and his wife $700 every single week, and on the one day that truly mattered to me, my 75th birthday, they didn't even show up. When I called to ask why, my daughter-in-law smirked and said, "Your age means nothing to us." I still remember the exact tone of her voice. Not angry, not apologetic, just careless, like she was telling me the weather forecast or commenting on the color of a napkin. As if 75 years of living, loving, sacrificing, and surviving meant absolutely nothing at all. For a few seconds I couldn't speak, my throat felt tight, my hands cold. The phone was still pressed against my ear, but I couldn't hear anything except the sound of my own heartbeat, slow and heavy, like it was struggling to keep going. Before I go any further, I want to ask you something. Wherever you are right now, would you take a moment and comment below? Tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. And if this story touches your heart even a little, please hit that like button, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, you'll want to know how this ends. Now, back to that phone call. I just ended the call, didn't argue, didn't cry. I just stared at the quiet screen in my hand like it belonged to someone else. The house felt like it was holding its breath. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. But everything else was silent. I walked to the living room and sat down on the couch, still wearing my good blue dress. The one my husband used to say made my eyes look brighter. I'd worn it for them, for the dinner that never happened, for the birthday no one remembered. I sat there for what felt like hours, but maybe it was only minutes. Time does strange things when your heart is breaking. The truth is, I'd spent the entire evening at a restaurant, alone, sitting at a table set for 5, watching other families laugh and blow out candles and take pictures together. I'd told the waiter they were running late. Then I told him they were stuck in traffic. Then I stopped making excuses and just paid the bill. The waiter had smiled gently when he handed me the receipt. "Happy birthday, ma'am," he'd said, and that was the only time anyone said it that night. I thought about calling again. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe something terrible had happened. Maybe they were in the hospital, or their car had broken down, or one of the kids got sick. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I knew because when I'd called, I'd heard music in the background, laughter, clinking glasses. They weren't in trouble. They were at a party. A friend's thing, Claire had said. As if that somehow made it acceptable. That night, I realized something I'd spent years avoiding. Something I didn't want to see because seeing it meant admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd been funding people who didn't see me as family anymore. They saw me as a bank account, a weekly deposit, a convenience. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd let them treat my love like a transaction, my generosity like an obligation, and my presence like an afterthought. But I didn't argue that night. I didn't chase them down or beg them to care. I didn't send long text messages asking what I'd done wrong or how I could fix it. I just waited, quietly, because I wanted to see what love really looked like when the money stopped. That was the night I stopped being generous. I need to take you back to where it all started, because you're probably wondering how a mother ends up in a situation like mine, how love turns into something unrecognizable, how you wake up one day and realize you've become invisible to the people you'd give everything for. It began about 3 years ago. Every Friday morning, I had a routine. I'd wake up around 7:30, make a pot of coffee, take my blood pressure pills with a glass of water, and sit at the kitchen table with my phone. By 9 o'clock, I'd open my banking app and send $700 to my son Michael's account. $700 every single week, without fail. At first, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like purpose. You see, Michael had called me one afternoon, and I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. Fear. Real, raw fear. His company had downsized. He'd lost his job, and with 2 kids in school, a mortgage, and his wife Claire working part-time at a dental office, they were drowning. Bills were piling up. The electricity had almost been shut off. They were eating rice and canned soup for dinner. When he asked for help, his voice cracked. "Mom, I hate to ask, but could you help us for a little while, just until I find something steady?" Of course I said yes. What kind of mother wouldn't? My husband had passed away 2 years before that. He left me his pension and some savings. It wasn't a fortune, but we'd always lived simply. We didn't take expensive vacations or buy new cars every few years. We believed in paying off what we owed and putting a little aside for emergencies. So when Michael needed help, I had it to give. That first transfer felt good. It felt like I was doing something that mattered. Like even though my husband was gone and my body was slowing down and my house felt too big and too quiet, I still had value. I could still protect my child. I remember Michael calling me that first Friday afternoon. "Mom, it went through. Thank you. I don't know what we'd do without you." His gratitude was genuine. I could hear the relief, the weight lifting off his shoulders. "You'd do the same for me," I told him. And I believed that. I really did. For the first few months, I'd get a text every week, a heart emoji. A quick "thanks, Mom." Sometimes Claire would send a photo of the kids with a caption like, "Because of Grandma, we're okay this week." It made me feel needed, connected, like I wasn't just an old woman living alone with her memories and her pills and her too quiet house. But then something shifted. The thank you texts became shorter, then less frequent, then they stopped altogether. Instead, I'd get a message on Thursday nights. "Hey, Mom, don't forget tomorrow." As if I'd ever forgotten. As if I wasn't the one who set an alarm on my phone just to make sure it went through on time. Then the requests started changing too. "Mom, could you send a little extra this week? The car needs new tires." "Mom, we're behind on the water bill. Can you cover it?" "Mom, the kids need winter coats. Could you add another 100? And every time, I said yes. Because that's what mothers do. We give, we stretch, we sacrifice. I started skipping my own doctor's appointments because the co-pays added up. I stopped buying the good coffee and started drinking the store brand. I wore the same 3 sweaters all winter because I didn't want to spend money on myself when they needed it more. My friends at church started noticing. One Sunday, Betty pulled me aside after service. "Honey, are you okay? You look tired." I smiled and told her I was fine. Just getting older. But Betty knew me too well. She lowered her voice. "Is it Michael?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't want to admit it out loud. Didn't want to say that my son had stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as something else entirely. "He's going through a hard time," I finally said. Betty squeezed my hand. "Just make sure you're not going through one too." I thought about her words all week, but when Friday came, I sent the money anyway. Because the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that if I stopped, he'd stop calling altogether. Terrified that I'd lose him. That I'd become the kind of mother people forget about. The kind whose calls go unanswered and whose holidays are spent alone. So I kept giving, kept sending, kept pretending everything was normal. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't help anymore. It was habit. And habits don't require gratitude. They just require repetition. There's a photograph on my mantle. It's old now. The colors faded to soft yellows and blues. In it, my husband Robert and I are standing in front of this very house. The same house I'm sitting in right now. We're young, maybe 30, and we're smiling like we just won the lottery. We hadn't won anything. We'd just signed the mortgage papers. Robert worked at the post office for 32 years. I worked part-time at the library and took care of Michael when he was small. We didn't have much, but what we had, we built together. Every piece of furniture, every coat of paint, every memory pressed into these walls. Robert used to say, "We don't need to be rich, we just need to be steady." And we were. Steady and strong and committed to building a life that meant something. When Michael was born, Robert cried. I'd never seen him cry before that. He held our son in his arms and whispered, "I'm going to teach you how to be a man." And he did. Or at least, he tried. I remember Michael at 8 years old, standing in the driveway with Robert, learning how to change a tire. Robert didn't just show him. He explained why it mattered. One day, someone you love might need help, and you'll know what to do. Michael listened. He always listened back then. On Sundays, Robert would take him to the hardware store. They'd walk the aisles together, talking about tools and projects and how to fix things instead of replacing them. Money doesn't grow on trees. Robert would say. So we take care of what we have. I taught him other things: how to write thank you notes, how to apologize when he was wrong, how to look people in the eye when he spoke to them, how to show up when he said he would. When Michael was 16, he got his first job bagging groceries. He came home that first Friday with a check for $83, and he was so proud. Robert shook his hand like he was a grown man. The next morning, Michael handed me a small bouquet of daisies. They were a little wilted, probably from the discount bin at the store, but they were the most beautiful flowers I'd ever seen. "For you, Mom," he'd said, "because you always take care of me." I kept one of those daisies pressed in my Bible. It's still there. Back then, I thought I'd done everything right. I thought the values we'd instilled in him would last forever. I thought love and respect were things you learned young and carried with you always. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Maybe it was when he went to college and met Claire. She came from a different kind of family, the kind that measured success by the size of your house and the brand of your car, the kind that believed image mattered more than integrity. Or maybe it was when he got his first corporate job and started wearing ties and talking about quarterly earnings and networking events. He'd come home for holidays and seem distracted, like our little house wasn't enough anymore. Robert noticed it too. One Christmas, after Michael and Claire left early, Robert sat beside me on the couch and said quietly, "He's forgetting where he came from." I'd defended Michael then. "He's just busy. He's building his own life." But Robert shook his head. Building a life and forgetting your foundation are two different things. I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to think that the little boy who brought me wilted daisies had grown into a man who saw his mother as a resource instead of a person. But looking back now, I can see it clearly. The shift was slow, gradual, like watching a photograph fade in the sunlight. You don't notice it happening until one day you look closely and realize the colors are gone. After Robert died, I thought Michael would step up. I thought he'd remember everything his father taught him. I thought he'd be the man Robert raised him to be. And for a while, he tried. He called more often. He helped me sort through Robert's things. He held my hand at the funeral. But then life got hard for him, and suddenly, I wasn't his mother anymore. I was his solution, his safety net, his Friday morning deposit. The pension Robert left me was supposed to be my security. The savings we'd built together, penny by penny, year after year, were supposed to carry me through my final years with dignity. Instead, they became Michael's backup plan, Claire's shopping fund, the reason they could go out to eat while I reheated leftovers. I used to think about what Robert would say if he were still here. Would he be disappointed? Angry? Heartbroken? Probably all three. Because we'd taught Michael to value people over money, to show gratitude, to honor the sacrifices others made for him. But somewhere along the way, he unlearned it all. He once gave me flowers on payday. Now he gives me deadlines. The thing about giving is that once you start, people expect you to keep going. And the thing about expectations is that they grow quietly, like weeds in a garden you forgot to tend. It started small enough. "Mom, the landlord raised the rent. Could you help with the difference this month?" $200. "Mom, the washing machine broke. We need a new one or we'll have to go to the laundromat every week." $400. "Mom, Claire's car needs repairs. The mechanic says it's not safe to drive." $600. Each time, I told myself it was temporary. Each time, I believed them when they said it was the last time. Each time, I transferred the money before they even finished explaining why they needed it. But temporary has a way of becoming permanent when no one's paying attention. Within a year, the $700 every Friday wasn't enough anymore. There were always extras, always emergencies, always something that couldn't wait. I started keeping a list in my mind, not because I wanted to throw it back in their faces, but because I needed to remember, needed to make sure I wasn't imagining things. January, heater repair. February, dental work for Claire. March, new tires and a battery. April, spring break trip for the kids. Wait, spring break trip? I remember pausing when Michael mentioned that one. A trip? Just a little getaway. he'd said quickly. "The kids have been so stressed with school. We thought it would be good for them." I wanted to ask how they could afford a vacation when they could barely afford groceries. I wanted to say that maybe they should save that money for actual emergencies. But I didn't. Because saying no felt like slamming a door, and I was terrified of what would happen if that door closed. So I said yes, again. The worst part wasn't the money itself. It was what I gave up to provide it. I started missing my own doctor's appointments. My knees had been bothering me for months, aching every time I stood up or climbed the stairs. My doctor wanted me to see a specialist, maybe get some physical therapy. But the co-pays were expensive, and if I spent money on myself, that meant less for Michael, less for the kids, less for keeping them afloat. So I told myself I'd go next month, then the month after. Then eventually I stopped scheduling appointments altogether. I just took some ibuprofen when the pain got bad and kept moving. My blood pressure medication ran out, and instead of refilling it right away, I waited, stretched it, skipped days. Because the pharmacy wasn't cheap, and every dollar I spent on myself felt like a dollar I was stealing from them. One Sunday after church, Betty invited me to lunch. Nothing fancy, just a little cafe downtown where they made good soup and fresh bread. I almost said yes. I wanted to say yes. But then I thought about the $12 it would cost, and I thought about Michael's text from the night before, asking if I could help with the electric bill. "Maybe next time," I told Betty. She looked at me for a long moment, not with pity, with concern. "You're allowed to live your own life, you know," she said gently. I smiled. "I know." But I didn't. Not really. A few weeks later, Betty and 2 other friends from church came to visit me at home. They brought tea and cookies, and we sat in my living room talking about everything and nothing. Then Betty said, "Sweetheart, we're worried about you." I set my teacup down carefully. "I'm fine." "You're not," said Dorothy, the older of the 3. She had that no-nonsense tone that only women in their 80s can pull off. "You look exhausted. You've lost weight, and you're wearing the same coat you wore last winter." "It's a perfectly good coat," I said quietly. "That's not the point," Betty said. "The point is that you're giving everything away and leaving nothing for yourself." I felt my throat tighten. "They need me." "They need your money," Dorothy corrected. "That's not the same thing." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell them they didn't understand, that Michael was going through a hard time, that family helps family. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, I knew they were right. "What happens if you stop?" Betty asked softly. "What happens if you say no?" I looked at my hands folded in my lap. Then maybe they stop calling. There it was. The truth I'd been avoiding for months. The fear that kept me sending money even when my own cabinet was half empty. Even when my body hurt and my bank account shrank and my friends looked at me with worried eyes. I wasn't afraid of being broke. I was afraid of being unloved. Because at least when I sent the money, my phone rang. At least when I said yes, I got a text back. At least when I kept giving, I wasn't completely alone. But what I didn't realize then was that I was already alone. I just hadn't admitted it yet. Holidays have a way of exposing the truth about relationships. When you're loved, holidays feel warm. When you're forgotten, they feel like punishment. That year, Thanksgiving was the first crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. Michael had promised they'd come for dinner. I'd spent 2 days preparing. I made his favorite stuffing, the one with cranberries and pecans that Robert used to say was better than any restaurant's. I baked 2 pies because I couldn't decide between pumpkin and apple, so I made both. I set the table with my good china, the set my mother had given me when I got married. I even put out the nice napkins, the cloth ones I only used for special occasions. By 2 in the afternoon, everything was ready. The turkey was golden, the house smelled like butter and cinnamon and all the things that make a place feel like home. I changed into a nice blouse and put on a little lipstick. Then I waited. 3 o'clock came and went. I texted Michael. No response. 4 o'clock. I called. It went to voicemail. By 5, the food was getting cold. I covered everything with foil and put it in the oven on low heat, just to keep it warm a little longer. At 6:30, my phone finally buzzed. Hey Mom, so sorry. Claire's sister invited us last minute and the kids really wanted to see their cousins. We'll come by this weekend, promise. I stared at that message for a long time. Read it 3 times. Tried to find an apology that actually sounded sorry. Tried to find an explanation that made sense. But all I could see was the word, last minute. As if I were the backup plan. The second choice. The option they'd consider if nothing better came along. I didn't respond. I just turned off the oven, covered the food, and sat at the table alone. The good china looked ridiculous now. Fancy plates for an audience of 1. I ate a small plate of stuffing and half a slice of pie. The rest, I packed up and put in the freezer. I'd be eating Thanksgiving leftovers until New Year's. The next morning, my neighbor Helen knocked on my door. She's a kind woman, always smiling, always baking something. "How was your Thanksgiving?" she asked brightly. "I bet Michael and the family loved your cooking." I smiled. "Oh, you know how it is. Everyone's so busy these days." "They made it, though?" I hesitated, just for a second, then I nodded. Of course. The lie tasted bitter, but the truth felt worse. Christmas was harder. I bought gifts weeks in advance. A toy truck for the youngest, a science kit for the oldest, a beautiful scarf for Claire, a leather wallet for Michael. I wrapped each one carefully, writing their names on little tags in my neatest handwriting. I imagined their faces when they opened them, imagined the kids squealing, imagined Claire saying thank you, imagined Michael hugging me and calling me the best mom in the world. I told them I'd drop the gifts off on Christmas Eve. "Or you could come here," I suggested. "I'll make hot chocolate." "Sounds great, Mom," Michael said. "We'll let you know." Christmas Eve came. No text, no call. I tried not to think about it. I watched old movies, drank tea, went to bed early. Christmas morning, I woke up to a message sent at 11:42 the night before. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Sorry we couldn't make it. Super busy with Claire's family. We'll grab the gifts next week." Next week turned into 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into a month. Eventually, I just left the wrapped boxes in the corner of my guest room. Out of sight, but not out of mind. When people at church asked about my holidays, I lied. I told them everything was wonderful. Told them the kids were growing so fast. Told them Michael and Claire were doing great. But inside, I felt like I was disappearing. Because the truth was becoming clearer every single day. I was invisible to them unless they needed something. I existed in their world only when the first of the month rolled around and bills came due. Only when the car broke down, or the kids needed new shoes, or Claire wanted a weekend getaway. The rest of the time, I was a ghost. I started noticing things I hadn't let myself see before. How they never called just to talk. How they never asked how I was feeling or if I needed anything. How every conversation somehow circled back to money. "How are you, Mom?" "I'm okay, sweetheart. My knee's been acting up, but I'm managing." "That's good. Hey, speaking of managing, we're a little short this month. Think you could help with groceries?" Every time. Every single time. One evening, I sat in my living room, staring at my phone. I scrolled through my call log, 12 calls from Michael in the past 2 months. I opened the messages. Not one of them asked how I was. Not one said, "I love you," or "I miss you." They were all requests, all needs, all demands dressed up as questions. Even my voicemail sounded lonely. My 75th birthday fell on a Friday. I woke up that morning feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe after everything that had happened over the past year, I should have known better. But hope doesn't ask permission. It just shows up, uninvited, and whispers that maybe this time will be different. Michael had called 3 days earlier. "Mom, we want to take you out for your birthday. Somewhere nice. The kids are excited." I'd felt my chest tighten with something warm. "You don't have to do that." "We want to," he insisted. "You've done so much for us. Let us do this for you." I agreed. How could I not? That morning, I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to wear. I settled on my blue dress, the one Robert used to love. It still fit, though it hung a little looser now than it used to. I put on the pearl earrings Robert gave me on our 30th anniversary. I brushed my hair and pinned it back neatly. I even put on a little makeup, something I hadn't bothered with in months. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked alive again, like a woman who mattered. I got to the restaurant 15 minutes early. It was a small Italian place downtown, the kind with white tablecloths and candles on every table. Soft music played in the background, something classical and gentle. The hostess smiled when I walked in. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Michael Carter, party of 5. She checked her book and nodded. "Right this way." She led me to a corner table near the window. It was perfect, quiet but not isolated, close enough to see other families celebrating but far enough to have our own conversation. I sat down and arranged my purse on the chair beside me. The waiter came over, a young man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Just water for now, please. I'm waiting for my family." "Of course. And happy birthday." I blinked. "How did you know?" He grinned. "It's on the reservation. We'll make sure you get a special dessert later." I thanked him, feeling that warm hope spread a little wider in my chest. The restaurant filled up slowly. Families, couples, groups of friends, everyone seemed happy. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. I checked my phone. 6:15. They were supposed to be here at 6. Maybe they hit traffic. Maybe one of the kids needed a last-minute bathroom stop. Maybe they were running late because they stopped to get me flowers. I smiled at the thought. Flowers would be nice. 6:30. Still nothing. I texted Michael, "I'm here. See you soon." No response. The waiter came back. "Would you like to order an appetizer while you wait?" "Not yet, thank you. They should be here any minute." He nodded, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pity, maybe, or understanding. Like he'd seen this before. By 7, I'd finished 3 glasses of water. My hands were folded in my lap, my phone face up on the table so I wouldn't miss a notification. I watched a family at the next table. Grandmother, parents, 3 kids. They were laughing about something, passing plates around, sharing bites of each other's meals. The grandmother said something that made everyone laugh, and the youngest child leaned over and kissed her cheek. I looked away. At 7:30, I couldn't wait anymore. My fingers shook as I pressed Michael's name on my phone. It rang 4 times. Then I heard his voice, slightly muffled, like he was in a loud room. "Hey, Mom." "Michael, I'm still at the restaurant." A pause. Then, faintly, I heard music, voices, clinking glasses. "Oh, yeah, sorry about that." Sorry about that, like he'd forgotten to pick up milk from the store. "Where are you?" I asked quietly. "We're at a friend's thing. Claire's coworker is having a party. We thought we told you we couldn't make it." My throat felt tight. "You didn't." "Oh, well, it's not a big deal. Your age means nothing to us anyway." I heard Claire laugh in the background. Not at me, maybe, but it didn't matter. The sound cut through me like glass. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but sit there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to them celebrate someone else's life while mine sat alone at a table set for 5. "Mom? You still there?" I ended the call. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the candle flickering in front of me. Then I felt something warm on my cheek. I touched it and realized I was crying. The waiter appeared beside me, his expression gentle. "Ma'am, can I get you anything?" I shook my head. "Just the check, please." He hesitated. "You don't want to order?" "No, thank you." He brought the bill, and I paid for the water I'd drunk. When he returned with the receipt, he said softly, "Happy birthday." I managed a smile. "Thank you." I drove home in silence, didn't turn on the radio, didn't cry anymore. Just drove, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, trying to keep myself together. When I got home, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my front door. The porch light was on, the windows were dark, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Empty. Inside, I took off the blue dress and hung it back in the closet, put away the pearls, washed my face. Then I sat on the edge of my bed and thought about what had just happened, what had been happening for months, maybe years. And for the first time, I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding. Maybe love shouldn't cost $700 a week. Saturday morning, I woke up at my usual time, 7:30. The sun was just starting to come through my bedroom curtains, soft and pale. I made coffee, took my pills, sat at the kitchen table. But this time, I didn't reach for my phone. I just sat there, hands wrapped around my mug, watching steam rise and disappear into nothing. My banking app was right there, one tap away, like it had been every Friday for 3 years. But it wasn't Friday anymore. It was Saturday, and something inside me had shifted. I kept thinking about that restaurant table, the 5 empty chairs, the waiter's gentle eyes, the sound of Claire's laugh in the background while I sat there alone, wearing my best dress, waiting for people who never intended to show up. Your age means nothing to us. The words circled in my mind over and over until they didn't even sound like words anymore. Just noise. Just cruelty dressed up as honesty. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot, and it burned my tongue a little, but I didn't care. For 3 years, I'd sent that money like clockwork. Never late, never questioned, never asked for proof of where it went or what it paid for. I'd trusted them, believed them, sacrificed for them. And what had it bought me? Empty chairs, ignored calls, a birthday spent alone. I picked up my phone, not to open the banking app, but just to hold it, to feel its weight, to remind myself that I had a choice. I could send the money, pretend nothing happened, smooth it over, keep the peace. Or I could stop. The thought terrified me, because stopping meant facing the truth I'd been running from. It meant admitting that the only thing connecting me to my son was a weekly transaction. It meant risking the one thing I feared most, losing him completely. But then I thought about something Robert used to say when Michael was young. If you have to beg someone to love you, they don't. I set the phone down, and I did nothing. Sunday came and went. I watered my plants. I read a book. I made soup. I lived. Monday afternoon, my phone rang. Claire's name lit up the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. Hello. Hey. Her voice was light, casual. Your transfer didn't go through. Did you forget? There it was. No greeting. No asking how I was. Just straight to the money. No, I said simply. A pause. I could almost hear her brain recalibrating, trying to make sense of my answer. What do you mean, no? I mean, it's not coming. The lightness in her voice vanished. You can't just stop. We depend on that. Something about the way she said that instead of you made everything clear. They didn't depend on me. They depended on what I provided. There was a difference. I know, I said quietly. That's the problem. Her tone sharpened. What's that supposed to mean? I could have explained, could have listed all the missed holidays and ignored calls and broken promises, could have told her how much it hurt to sit alone at that restaurant, waiting for people who were laughing at someone else's party. But I didn't. Because the truth was, she already knew. They both did. They just didn't care. It means I'm done, I said. Done? She laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of sound people make when they're angry but trying to stay in control. You can't be serious. We have bills. The kids need things. Michael's still looking for steady work. Then maybe he should look harder. Silence, cold and sharp. Are you really going to do this? She asked, her voice tight. After everything we've been through? After we've counted on you? I closed my eyes, took a breath. You counted on my money, not on me. That's not fair. Neither was my birthday. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, colder. Fine, do what you want. But don't expect us to come running when you need something. The threat hung in the air between us, sharp and clear. But it didn't scare me. Not anymore. Because the truth was, I'd needed them for months. Needed them to show up. Needed them to remember. Needed them to care. And they hadn't. So what, exactly, was I losing? Goodbye, Claire. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking a little as I set the phone down. My heart was beating fast, that anxious kind of fast that comes after you've done something you can't take back. But underneath the fear, there was something else. Relief. For 3 years, I'd carried the weight of their lives on my shoulders. I'd stretched myself thin, gave until I had nothing left, and convinced myself that sacrifice was the same as love. But it wasn't. Love shows up. Love remembers. Love doesn't put a price tag on your worth. I walked to the window and looked out at my small backyard. The grass needed mowing. The fence needed painting. There were 100 little things I'd neglected because I was too busy taking care of everyone else. Maybe it was time to take care of myself. For the first time in years, silence felt like freedom. The messages started the next morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating toast with jam, when my phone started buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times in a row. I picked it up and saw Michael's name. 3 missed calls, 2 voicemails, 4 text messages. I set the phone back down and finished my breakfast. When I finally listened to the voicemails, his voice was strained, tight, like he was trying very hard not to yell. Mom, call me back. We need to talk about this. The second one was sharper. Mom, this isn't funny. You can't just cut us off without warning. Call me. I deleted both and moved on to the texts. Mom, please, let's talk. I don't understand why you're doing this. Claire's upset. The kids are asking about you. This isn't like you. That last one almost made me laugh. Because the truth was, this was exactly like me. The real me. The version of myself I'd forgotten existed under all the giving and the bending and the endless trying to be enough. I didn't respond to any of them. By Wednesday, the messages had changed. The desperation had hardened into something else. Anger, maybe, or entitlement pretending to be anger. You know what? Fine. Be selfish. See if we care. You're really going to abandon your grandkids like this? I hope you're happy, sitting alone in that house. Each message was meant to cut, meant to make me feel guilty, meant to pull me back into the role I'd been playing for 3 years. But I just read them, one by one, and felt nothing. Or maybe not nothing. Maybe I felt clarity. Because every angry word they sent proved exactly what I'd suspected. They didn't miss me. They missed my money. Thursday morning, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Hello? Aunt Jean? It was my nephew, Daniel, Michael's cousin. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Daniel, what a surprise. Yeah, listen. He sounded uncomfortable. Michael called me. He's really upset. Says you two had some kind of falling out. I stayed quiet, waiting. He says you just stopped helping them out of nowhere, that you're not answering his calls. He's worried about you. Worried about me. That was rich. I'm fine, Daniel, but thank you for checking. So it's true? You stopped sending money? There it was. Even Daniel, who I'd babysat when he was little, who I'd given birthday cards to every year, had been told the story in terms of money. It's more complicated than that, I said gently. Look, I'm not trying to take sides, but they've got kids, you know, and Michael's still looking for work. Maybe you could just help them out a little longer? For the kids? Everyone always said it was for the kids, as if using children as bargaining chips somehow made the request more noble. The kids will be fine, I said. Goodbye, Daniel. I hung up before he could say more. Over the next few days, I got calls from 2 other cousins and a family friend I hadn't heard from in 5 years. All of them had the same script. All of them had been contacted by Michael or Claire. All of them were trying to convince me to reconsider. It was exhausting, but it was also revealing. Because not one of them asked me what had happened. Not one asked if I was okay. They all just assumed I was being unreasonable, cruel, selfish. The word selfish kept coming up, like wanting to keep my own money, earned by my husband's 32 years of hard work, was somehow a moral failing. I started keeping a folder. Just a plain manila folder I found in my desk drawer. Inside, I put printed copies of every bank transfer, every text message asking for money, every receipt for things I'd paid for, every bill I'd covered. I didn't know why I was doing it at first. It just felt important to have proof. Not for them, they wouldn't care about proof. But for me. Because when you're gaslit for long enough, you start to doubt your own memory. You start to wonder if maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're being unreasonable. Maybe you're remembering things wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. Over 3 years, I'd sent them more than $100,000. $100,000. And in return, I'd gotten empty chairs, forgotten holidays, and a daughter-in-law who thought my 75th birthday meant nothing. I stared at those bank statements for a long time. Seeing it all laid out like that, in black and white, made something inside me settle, made me feel less crazy, less guilty. I wasn't abandoning them. I was saving myself. Friday afternoon, Betty called. Her voice was gentle but concerned. "Honey, have you been online today?" "No," I said. "Why?" She hesitated. "You might want to check Facebook. Claire posted something." My stomach tightened. What kind of something? "Just look, and then call me back if you need to talk." I hung up and opened the app, my fingers suddenly cold. There, at the top of my feed, was Claire's face. And she was crying. The video was titled, "When Family Turns Their Back on You." Claire sat in what looked like her living room, tissues in hand, makeup smudged just enough to look authentic. The lighting was soft, flattering. She'd clearly thought about the setup. "I don't usually do this," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "But I need to talk about something that's been breaking my heart." I should have closed the app, should have turned off my phone and walked away. But I couldn't. I just sat there, watching her perform. My husband's mother has decided to cut us off completely. No warning, no conversation. She just stopped helping us, and now we're struggling to keep the lights on. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We've always been there for her. Always. When she needed us, we showed up. But the moment we needed her support, she turned her back on us and our children. Our children. She said it like I'd personally taken food out of their mouths. I don't understand how someone can claim to love their grandchildren but refuse to help them. How can you watch your family suffer and do nothing? The comments started rolling in almost immediately. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. Some people are just selfish. Praying for your family." Each comment felt like a knife, but I kept watching. Claire continued, her voice rising with emotion. "We've tried talking to her. We've apologized for anything we might have done wrong. But she won't even answer our calls. It's like we don't exist anymore." She leaned closer to the camera, her expression pained. "If anyone knows what it's like to be abandoned by family, please share your story. I just need to know we're not alone." The video had been up for 20 minutes and already had over 200 views. People were sharing it, commenting, taking sides without knowing a single fact. I set my phone down, my hands trembling slightly. This was what it had come to, a public trial where I was the villain and she was the victim, where 3 years of generosity vanished and all that remained was my refusal to continue. For a moment, I felt something dangerous rising in my chest. Anger, the urge to comment, to defend myself, to list everything I'd done for them. But then I remembered something Robert used to say. The truth doesn't need to be loud, it just needs to be true. So I did nothing. I made myself a cup of tea, sat in my favorite chair, and waited. By evening, Betty called again. "Have you seen the comments now?" "No," I said. "Should I?" "Yes." There was something in her voice. Not concern this time, something lighter. "You really should." I opened the app again and scrolled to Claire's video. The comments section had changed. Someone named Jennifer had written, "Wait, didn't you just post about your new diamond bracelet last week?" Below that, someone else added, "And wasn't there a vacation photo from 2 weeks ago, spa day and everything?" Another comment, "I'm confused. If you can't keep the lights on, how are you affording designer purses?" I scrolled up to Claire's profile and looked at her recent posts. There they were, photos from the past month. A new bracelet with the caption, "Treating myself." A weekend getaway with champagne glasses and sunset views. A shopping haul showing 3 bags from expensive stores. The comments on the live stream kept coming. This doesn't add up. Maybe the grandmother had a good reason. You can't cry poverty and post luxury items in the same week. Someone had even screenshot her posts and shared them side by side with her tearful video. The contrast was damning. I watched as the narrative shifted in real time. The sympathy turned to skepticism. The support turned to questions. One commenter wrote, "My mom helped me when I was struggling, and I called her every week just to thank her. I didn't wait until she stopped to suddenly care." Another said, "If she's been helping you for years and you can't even show up for her birthday, maybe she's not the problem." I didn't know who these people were, didn't know how they'd found out about the birthday. Maybe someone we knew had shared the story. Maybe Claire had mentioned it in a comment without realizing how it sounded. Either way, the truth was spreading faster than the lies. Claire must have noticed, because within an hour, the video was gone, deleted, as if erasing it would erase what people had seen. But the screenshots remained, the comments had been shared, the questions had been asked. I sat back in my chair, holding my tea, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not victory, just release. Because I hadn't needed to defend myself, hadn't needed to argue or explain or beg people to believe me. The truth had defended itself. Claire had exposed her own contradictions, her own priorities, her own version of reality that didn't match the facts. My phone buzzed with a text from Betty. "You okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine." "Good. Because half the church saw that mess, and everyone's talking about how proud they are of you." I didn't need their pride. But it was nice to know I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because they'd tried to make me the villain in their story, tried to use public opinion as a weapon, tried to shame me into submission. But the internet, for all its flaws, had done something unexpected. It had held up a mirror. They deleted the post, but the truth stayed. Monday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, the kind that comes when you stop fighting against the current and finally decide which direction you're going to swim. I got dressed in comfortable clothes, ate a real breakfast, and made a list. Not a mental list, an actual written list on paper, the way Robert used to do before tackling a big project. First stop, the bank. The branch was quiet when I arrived, just after opening. A young woman at the desk greeted me with a professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" "I need to close an account," I said. She pulled up my information on her computer. "Which account would you like to close?" "The joint savings account, the one ending in 4,793. I'd opened that account 5 years ago when Robert was still alive. We'd called it the emergency fund. After he passed, I'd kept Michael's name on it, thinking it would make things easier if something ever happened to me, if I got sick, if I needed help. But emergency had become convenience, and help had become expectation. The woman typed a few things, then looked up. "Just to confirm, this is a joint account with Michael Carter?" "Yes. You're listed as the primary holder, so you can close it without his signature. Would you like to transfer the remaining balance to your personal checking account?" "Yes, please." She processed everything efficiently. Within 10 minutes, the account was closed, and the money was safely back in my name alone. As I walked out of the bank, I felt lighter, like I'd just removed a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. Second stop, the law office. I'd met Edward Bennett at church about 2 years ago. He was a semi-retired lawyer who still took on a few clients here and there, mostly estate planning and wills. He was kind, patient, and had that gentle way of explaining complicated things that made you feel smart instead of stupid. His office was above a bookstore downtown, small, tidy, filled with wooden shelves and soft lighting. He stood when I entered, extending his hand. "Mrs. Carter, good to see you. Please, call me Jean." "Jean, then. What can I do for you today?" I sat down across from his desk, folding my hands in my lap. "I need to change my will." He nodded, pulling out a notepad. "Of course. What kind of changes are we talking about?" I took a breath. This was the part I'd been thinking about all weekend, the part that felt both terrifying and necessary. "I want to remove my son and his wife as beneficiaries." Edward's pen paused for just a moment. Then he continued writing, his face neutral. All right, and who would you like to designate instead? I want to establish a scholarship fund, specifically for women over 50 who are trying to go back to school or start new careers. He looked up, something warm flickering in his expression. That's a beautiful idea. I've been thinking about it a lot, I said quietly, about women who maybe gave everything to their families and then found themselves alone, women who put their own dreams on hold and now want a second chance. Women like me, I didn't say. But I think he understood. We can absolutely set that up, Edward said. I'll draft a document creating the fund in your name. You can specify criteria for recipients, the application process, how the money should be distributed. We spent the next hour going over details, how much would go into the fund, how it would be managed, who would oversee the selection process. When we finished, Edward leaned back in his chair. I have to ask, and you don't have to answer, but is everything all right with your son? I smiled, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. Everything's exactly as it should be. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is admirable. A lot of people in your position would act out of anger. But this is constructive, purposeful. It's not about punishing him, I said. It's about honoring what my husband and I built. We worked hard for that money. We saved it with love and care. And I want it to go somewhere it'll be appreciated. Then this is exactly the right choice. Before I left, Edward promised to have the documents ready for my signature within the week. Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from avoiding conflict, the kind that comes from finally making a decision that aligns with who you really are. My money wasn't going to people who saw me as an obligation. It wasn't going to fund vacations disguised as necessities or jewelry bought with guilt-tripped dollars. It was going to women who needed it. Women who would value it. Women who might write thank you notes and mean them. That evening, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and looked around. At the furniture Robert and I had picked out together, at the walls we'd painted, at the life we'd built with care and intention. This house had always been about love, about family, about building something that mattered. And now, it still was. I'd just redefined what family meant. Not blood, not obligation, not transactions disguised as relationships. Family was the people who showed up, who remembered, who cared. And if that meant my family was a group of women I'd never met, women who would benefit from a second chance, then so be it. My kindness wasn't gone. It just found a better home. About a month after I'd closed the account and signed the new will, there was a knock on my door. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'd been in the garden, pulling weeds and trimming back the roses that had gotten unruly. My hands were dirty, my knees ached from kneeling, but I felt good, useful, present in my own life again. The knock came just as I was washing my hands at the kitchen sink. I dried them on a towel and walked to the door, expecting maybe a delivery or one of the neighbors. But when I looked through the peephole, my stomach tightened. Michael stood on my porch, holding a small gift bag. Behind him, half a step back, was Claire. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast, her arms crossed over her chest. I almost didn't open the door, almost turned around and pretended I wasn't home. But then I thought, no. I'd spent too long avoiding difficult moments, too long making myself smaller to keep other people comfortable. I opened the door. Michael's face broke into a smile, the kind that looked practiced, rehearsed. Hey, Mom! Michael. I didn't move from the doorway. He glanced at Claire, then back at me. Can we come in? We'd like to talk. I stepped aside without a word and let them enter. They walked into the living room like they'd done 100 times before, but somehow everything felt different now. The air was heavier, the space between us more pronounced. Michael sat on the couch, setting the gift bag on the coffee table. Claire remained standing near the window, her sunglasses still on, her expression unreadable. I took the chair across from them, my hands folded in my lap, and waited. Michael cleared his throat. So, it's been a while. Yes, I said simply. He shifted, clearly uncomfortable. We wanted to come by and clear the air. Things got out of hand, and we think maybe there were some misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. That was the word he'd chosen. Go on, I said. Look, we know we made mistakes. Claire didn't mean what she said about your birthday. She was stressed. We both were. Things have been really tough, and sometimes we say things we don't mean. I stayed quiet, just watching him, watching the way his hands fidgeted, the way his eyes darted around the room, landing everywhere except on me. Claire finally spoke, her voice tight. We've apologized, multiple times, but you won't even talk to us. I'm talking to you now, I said calmly. You know what I mean. She took off her sunglasses, and I saw the frustration in her eyes. You cut us off without any explanation. You closed the account. You won't return our calls. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. I know. Michael leaned forward, his voice softening. Mom, we're family. Family doesn't just give up on each other. We need you. There it was. The word that was supposed to make everything okay. Family. Do you? I asked quietly. He blinked. What? Do you need me? Or do you need my money? His face tightened. That's not fair. Neither was sitting alone at a restaurant on my 75th birthday. The room went silent. Michael looked down at his hands. Claire shifted her weight, her jaw clenched. I continued, my voice steady. For 3 years, I sent you $700 every single week. I paid for your rent, your groceries, your car repairs, your vacations. I skipped my own doctor's appointments so I'd have enough to cover your emergencies. We didn't ask you to do that, Claire muttered. You're right. You didn't ask. You just expected. Michael finally looked up at me. We were struggling, Mom. We needed help. And I helped, over and over and over. But help isn't supposed to be one-sided. It's not supposed to come with forgotten holidays and unanswered calls and disrespect. We said we were sorry, he said, his voice rising slightly. You said a lot of things, Michael. You said you'd come to Thanksgiving. You said you'd be at Christmas. You said you'd take me to dinner for my birthday. But the only promise you ever kept was spending my money. Claire stepped forward. This is ridiculous. You're acting like we're terrible people just because we needed financial support. No, I said, standing up. I'm acting like someone who finally realized her worth. And it's not measured in weekly deposits. Michael stood too, reaching for the gift bag. We brought you something. A peace offering. Can we just start over? I looked at the bag. Looked at his desperate expression, looked at Claire's barely concealed irritation. And I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who would have accepted that gift, hugged them both, and pretended everything was fine just to keep the peace. But I wasn't her anymore. Michael, I said gently, do you remember what Claire said to me when I called that night? He hesitated. She was upset. She said my age meant nothing to you. She didn't mean it like that. Maybe not, but I decided to believe her. I met his eyes, holding his gaze steady. So I made sure my money means nothing to you either. His face went pale. What does that mean? It means I changed my will. It means every dollar I have is going somewhere it'll actually be appreciated. It means you don't have to worry about my age or my expectations or my feelings anymore. Mom, his voice cracked. You taught me something important, I said. You taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just convenience. For the first time since they'd arrived, Michael had no response, no argument, no justification. Claire grabbed her purse. Let's go. This is pointless. Michael picked up the gift bag slowly, like he was moving through water. He looked at me one more time, and I saw something flicker across his face. Regret, maybe. Or just disappointment that his plan hadn't worked. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Michael. They left without another word. I watched through the window as they got into their car and drove away. And then I sat back down in my chair, my heart beating steady and strong, and felt nothing but relief. Life has a way of settling into new rhythms when you let it. The weeks after Michael and Claire's visit were quiet, but not in the lonely way I'd known before. This quiet felt different, intentional. Like the difference between being forgotten and choosing solitude. I started noticing things I'd missed for years. The way morning light came through my kitchen window at exactly 8:15, painting everything gold. The sound of birds arguing in the tree outside. The way my coffee tasted better when I actually sat down to drink it instead of rushing through a banking transaction. Every Friday morning, I still opened my app at 9 o'clock. Old habits take time to break. But instead of sending money to Michael's account, I transferred it to the scholarship fund Edward had helped me establish. $700. Every week. Just like before. Except now, it was going somewhere it mattered. The fund was officially called the Robert and Jean Carter Second Chances Scholarship. Edward had suggested including Robert's name, and the moment he said it, I knew it was right. Robert would have loved this. He always believed in helping people who were trying to help themselves. The first month, I didn't hear anything. I just watched the balance grow, imagining the women who might benefit from it someday. The second month, Edward called. We have our first applicant. Her name is Linda. She's 53, recently divorced, and wants to go back to school to become a nurse. Tell me about her, I said. He read me parts of her application, how she'd spent 30 years raising her children and supporting her husband's career. How, after the divorce, she'd realized she had no degree, no recent work experience, and no way to support herself long-term. How nursing had always been her dream, but life had gotten in the way. She sounds perfect, I told him. By the third month, we had 5 applicants. By the 6th month, we'd awarded 3 scholarships. And then one Tuesday afternoon, a letter arrived. It was handwritten on simple stationery, the kind you buy at the drugstore. The return address was from a town 2 hours away. I made myself a cup of tea before opening it, wanting to give it the attention it deserved. The letter began. Dear Mrs. Carter, you don't know me, but you changed my life. Her name was Patricia. She was 56. She'd applied for the scholarship to finish her degree in social work after spending 20 years as a stay-at-home mother. Her husband had passed away suddenly, and she'd found herself alone, uneducated in the eyes of employers and terrified of the future. When I got the letter saying I'd been chosen, she wrote, I cried for an hour, not sad tears, relief tears, because for the first time in 2 years, I felt like someone saw me. Like someone believed I was worth investing in. She went on to describe her first semester. The nervousness. The late nights studying. The moment she got her first A on an exam and realized she could actually do this. The letter ended with a single sentence that I must have read 20 times. Your kindness gave me hope when I had none. I sat there with that letter in my hands, tears running down my face, feeling something I hadn't felt in so long. Purpose. Real, meaningful purpose. Not the hollow kind that comes from being used, the genuine kind that comes from making a difference in someone's life who actually wants to be helped. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a special box I'd started keeping. A box for the good things, the real things. That evening, Betty came over for dinner. We'd started doing that once a week, taking turns cooking. It was her turn to come to my place, and I'd made chicken and roasted vegetables, nothing fancy but enough. She noticed the box on the side table. What's that? Letters from the scholarship recipients, I said. Reminders. Of what? That there are still people in the world who say thank you and mean it. Betty smiled. That knowing smile of someone who'd watched me go through hell and come out the other side. You did a brave thing, you know. Walking away. It didn't feel brave at the time. It felt terrifying. That's what makes it brave. We ate dinner, talked about everything and nothing, laughed at things that weren't even that funny. When she left, she hugged me at the door and said, I'm proud of you. I'd heard those words before, but coming from her, they meant something. The following Sunday, I stood in church and looked around at the faces I'd known for years. People who'd watched me shrink, who'd tried to warn me, who'd waited patiently for me to find my way back to myself. After the service, Dorothy approached me. You look different. Different how? Lighter. She touched my arm gently, like you're not carrying the world anymore. She was right. I wasn't. I'd spent 3 years carrying the weight of other people's choices, other people's needs, other people's ingratitude. And the moment I set it down, I realized how much space it had been taking up. Space I could now fill with things that actually brought me joy. I started volunteering at the library on Wednesdays, just a few hours, helping with the children's reading program. Watching their faces light up when a story surprised them reminded me why I'd loved working there in the first place. I planted a small vegetable garden in the backyard, tomatoes and peppers and herbs I could use in cooking. Every morning, I'd walk out with my coffee and check on them, marveling at how something so small could grow into something nourishing. I even started taking that painting class I'd always talked about. I wasn't good at it, but that wasn't the point. The point was doing something just because I wanted to. My house is quiet these days, but it's not lonely. It's peaceful. There are still moments when I think about Michael, wonder if he's okay, wonder if he ever thinks about me with anything other than resentment. But those moments pass quickly now. Because I've learned something important in these months. You can't make people love you the way you deserve to be loved. You can't force gratitude or manufacture respect. All you can do is decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And I decided I wasn't willing to accept being invisible. Now, every Friday morning, I sit at my kitchen table with my coffee and my phone, and I send that $700 to women who need it, women who will use it to build better lives, women who understand the value of a second chance. Last week, I received another letter, this one from a woman named Grace who used her scholarship to become a teacher. She'd included a photo of herself in her classroom, surrounded by students, smiling like she'd found exactly where she belonged. I put that letter in the box with the others, and every now and then, I smile at how it all came full circle. They taught me what my worth was by forgetting it, and I reminded them by walking away. Before I let you go, I want to ask you something. If this story touched you in any way, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who took you for granted? How did you find your peace? I'd love to hear your stories. And if you haven't already, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss another story. Your support means everything. Thank you for listening.